Review copy provided by PlayStation. What is up, friends and fans? Jake here, and today we are talking The Last of Us.
Behind you!
It's hard to remember sometimes that The Last of Us originally came out on PlayStation 3 nearly a decade ago. A remaster, that's one thing, but The Last of Us Part 1 bills itself as a full-fledged remake, so we compiled a list of 17 changes from that original release. Let's go! 1. The graphics, duh. Everything in the remake has been, well, remade. From characters to environments to objects, everything looks different enough to make the remaster look bland by comparison. 2. Joel's walking pace has been adjusted. I'm sure everyone remembers this. Sometimes you would be forced to move at a snail's pace, so a certain portion of dialogue could be exchanged within a particular area. You could ameliorate this at the time by holding the sprint button, but in the remake, Joel retains his normal light jog pace at all times. 3. Some small objects now have interactable physics. So look at these magazines. They were completely static in the original game, but now you can move them. 4. Transitions between gameplay and cutscenes are now seamless. Since every part of the game is rendered in-engine, there is no need to cut to black as a transition. This change even adds small interstitial moments and animations like Joel closing a door after Ellie's first cutscene. 5. Minor changes have been made to camera angles. Given the visual enhancements to the game, some directorial changes have been made in light of those enhancements. Comparing this shot to the original, we see the camera sits closer to Joel and Ellie than it originally was. Something easier to justify when your visuals are this crisp. 6. Listen mode has been changed to look the way it does in The Last of Us Part 2. So now again, enemies are highlighted as white silhouettes rather than the transparent outlines of the original release. 7. The HUD has been replaced with a version seemingly identical to what appears in The Last of Us Part 2. The quick select menu, health bar, and aiming reticles for each weapon will feel familiar to anyone that played Part 2 recently. 8. The bow weapon has been altered to also resemble its Part 2 counterpart. In the original game, you would aim by holding L2 and then press R2 to loose an arrow. Here, like in Part 2, you hold and release R2 on your DualSense to fire arrows. 9. Weapons kick back more intensely this time around. Even after upgrading their recoil, we noticed a difference from how mild the effect was in the original game. 10. Collectibles are now viewed in the hands of a character rather than through a menu. 11. The gunsmithing mechanic from Part 2 returns in this remake. Joel modifies his weapons with visual panache, simply not seen in the original titles. So for those wondering how exactly he increases the range of his shotgun, now you know. He wipes it down, heck yeah. 12. Naughty Dog references have been shuffled around. So any veteran of The Last of Us knows that the game occasionally referenced Uncharted or Jak and Daxter, but those specific Easter eggs are occasionally gone, while new ones have been added throughout. For example, the board game cameos in the toy store, they're gone. But mascot character dolls are still in the game, and when you see them, there's an extra Nathan Drake doll to boot. 13. The broken watch. Joel's broken watch is an image that appears frequently throughout The Last of Us and Part 2. Now, Part 1 actually confirms for the first time that Joel's watch is perfectly intact until the moment he and Sarah are shot at the beginning of the game. So, you know, there's a metaphor for you. 14. When Sarah checks Joel's phone in the original game, the lock screen was this generic landscape. But in Part 1, we see a photo of her and Joel at a soccer game. The time has also changed from 2:15 a.m. to 1:56 a.m. The clocks in the house also reflect this change. What could it mean? 15. Shivs have been changed to look more like a crude screwdriver rather than a blade. 16. Infected AI and behavior has been altered. In Part 1, infected are now able to crawl towards you if they fall down, and the bloaters, more closely resembling their design in Part 2, retain their charge move, which was new to that game. And 17. This is the one thing on this list that we should categorize as, I think, a legitimate spoiler. So if you played The Last of Us Part 2 to completion, you're probably fine here, but tread carefully if you don't want to know about a little surprise near the end of this game. Okay, here it is. You're gone? Okay, it's the surgeon. You know the one. He has seen his character model changed to resemble who he is fleshed out to be in part 2. Obviously, this surgeon plays a large role in the sequel, being the father of one of the game's main playable characters, so now is the perfect time for The Last of Us to solidify the canon, or so it were. Interestingly, though the character model has changed, the voice lines seem to be the same, and he's still played by the same actor, Derek Phillips. And with that, we have reached the end of our list of changes The Last of Us Part 1 makes from its original release. How is Joel looking, everybody? Are you excited to check the game out, or are these 13 changes just not enough? Let me know in the comments below, and for everything else in games, you are already in the right place, so just let us explain. I'm Jake, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.